Hey guys, it is Monday again, and so I've just been trying to find some interesting topics regarding ASPD to talk to you guys about, just regarding my own personal experiences. And I really wish that this thing wouldn't show my face in here because I'm always like, my hair looks like shit. That is a narcissistic side of female ASPD, by the way, because we do have that component. The females have that component. I think I've mentioned that before. But males tend not to have that in ASPD, but women do. And I think that's just social conditioning, and we can use it to our advantage. But it's also irritating because it's like, do I look okay? Anyhow, so I'm going to be talking today about a lack of fear in ASPD, in men and women. It seems to be, the same sort of thing, interestingly enough. And we're talking specifically about psychopathy here today and lack of fear. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about, just from a cited article. So it's not just like some TikTok thing. It's actually, cited research article on lack of fear response. And I jotted down a bunch of examples in my own life, and I had to actually like put them down on my computer because there's quite a few. Which kind of back up the research that's been done regarding this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it then. So, and it's interesting because it's like it's still kind of up in the air as to whether or not it's inherited behavior or learned behavior, but there does seem to be some quite a bit of research saying that there are neural pathways in the brain and some amygdala activity that you can actually map in the brain that shows there's a lack of fear response. But still, is it inherited or not? Because trauma can actually change neural pathways in the brain as well. So which is it? And I don't know enough about like the structure of the brain to know what the structure of the amygdala and like how that works. So I don't really know, but still, is it learned? Is it inherited? Is it both? So let's see. The dissociation of emotional and cognitive processing may be the neural basis of the lack of anticipation of aversive events. Events in criminal psychopaths. Well, criminal. Okay, I'm not that, although I have had criminal activity in my past. There's been enough of a time has passed, so the statute of limitations. I can go into a bit of my criminal activity in the past and let you guys know. So I'll go into that and my lack of fear in terms of getting caught. So when I was 19, I was involved in the drug trade, producing and selling pretty heavily. I was into that, and so that was my criminal activity. There was no. Hold on a second. Yeah.
Mac and cheese is better if you want some.
Okay, thank you. I'll do a little bit in a bit. That was my dad, adopted dad. He's obsessed with mac and cheese. So that was the main criminal activity that I was involved in. Also, I guess you could consider this to be criminal activity. I was involved in what would be considered a gang. The cops considered it a gang in any case. The anti-Nazi skinheads in Chicago, they were called Shock, which is Skinheads of Chicago. And there was a rival gang, which were the Nazi skinheads, and I was heavily involved with that group as well. We were constantly getting arrested by the cops and harassed by the cops, but they were also beating my black friends in the street, which, I would say that we were in the right with that, but technically I was involved in a gang. So that's pretty much it. But I was never arrested for or caught for any of the drug trade stuff. So there you go. See, psychopathic behavior is characterized by an inability to have emotional involvement with others and by repeated violation of the rights of others. Psychopaths who are part of a wider group of persons with antisocial personality disorder seem to lack the ability to anticipate punishment and are deficient in autonomic responding, e.g. skin conductance responses, in anticipation of threatening events. High intelligence and high socioeconomic status may protect psychopaths from developing a criminal career and turn them into successful psychopaths who display a high incidence of reckless, risk-taking, and emotionally insensitive behavior patterns. So we would be considered, I'm considered to be high intelligence and a higher economic socioeconomic status. We were middle class, maybe upper middle class, maybe kind of in between middle class, upper middle class when I was growing up. And I was not a career criminal, obviously. It was something that I got involved in after moving to California briefly when I was 18, just when I turned 18. It was something I got involved in after my father molested me, and it was just a kind of unstable period of my life. It did not last long. It was about less than a year that I was involved in that. And then the skinhead thing was between the ages of 14 and 17. Definitely a rebellion thing, and lack of fear of any consequence, certainly, of course, and a rebellion thing, of course, as well, from severe abuse at home. And just, I was, I had a lot of black friends and a lot of Mexican friends from just where I grew up in the school and everything, and so I was certainly not going to be a Nazi. Okay, so let's see. Lack of prediction of consequences and punishment was certainly a part of my growing up in like my childhood and teen years. Whenever I did something that was against my mother, and like I got punished for literally everything, yet I kept up with this behavior even, although there would be severe punishment, I kept up with the behaviors that would result in severe punishment. It was like there was no, I didn't make that connection, or it was just like, fuck it, whatever, I'll do it anyway. So that was certainly a part of my behavioral patterns, absolutely. Like no fear of punishment, even despite the fact that it would be severe punishment. And I would do very reckless, ridiculous things and, get caught sometimes, oftentimes, because I'd be coming home at like 2 a.m, sneaking in through windows, and she would be there, and, that sort of thing. Or, getting in trouble with the police as a teenager because I'd be involved with these, the gang, whatever. Getting caught with weed or whatever, drinking, oftentimes drinking, or like having a party and like trashing the house, or stealing her car, and getting in trouble, that kind of thing. Just, a mess. But I had fun. I certainly had fun. Let's see. Most psychopaths seem to lack the ability to predict impending harm from signals of threat, and may thus show deficient fear conditioning, where a formerly neural stimulus comes to predict a fear-eliciting stimulus after they have been paired several times. So I'm going to read you some examples of things that most people would have been afraid, and I did not have any kind of fear response at all. In fact, my response was sort of like, if I can recall properly, kind of like a cold curtain coming down instead of feeling fear. And that's exactly how I recall the feeling. It's just like kind of a curtain coming down over me, and a feeling of calm in order to get myself out of the situation, which I always did, clearly, because I'm still alive. Let's see. I could do things like, riding through the projects in my city, like at 2:30 in the morning, talking to gangbangers, no fear whatsoever. And, interestingly enough, because I showed no fear, I never got into any sort of situation or trouble with them, because they were just like, oh, she's one of us, or like, even though I'm a little white girl, showing no fear was, I guess to them, made them feel like they didn't need to harass me, perhaps, who knows, but I clearly had no trouble with them. I never had any sort of harassment from them, which is unusual. There was a situation when we were at this party called Hell House, where it was kind of like a squatter house for a lot of kids who didn't have a proper home, like underage kids, and there would be lots of parties there. So this one particular time, there was a party where all kinds of people were showing up. There were like Hell's Angels showing up, and I was about, I think, 16 at the time. My boyfriend was this black skinhead, and the Hell's Angels showed up, who are, notoriously racist. There was this one guy, he probably was like, I don't know, in his 20s, and I'm 16, and he had his eyes set on me, and he was flirting with me, and I had just started tripping on acid, or I wasn't tripping yet, I literally just put a blotter of sunshine acid on my tongue, and so I wasn't tripping yet. That takes about, I don't know, like an hour to kick in. So I wasn't tripping, but my boyfriend was. And this guy was on crank and had been drinking, so he was high out of his mind. So when he finds out that my boyfriend is a black skinhead, he completely flips out, grabs me around the neck, gets out his switchblade and holds it to my neck, and starts shouting at the top of his lungs that I'm a race traitor. Sorry, that I'm a race traitor, and that, you know, either I come with him and be his woman, or he's gonna slit my throat, you know, all this nonsense. You know, and I'm standing there thinking, oh, for fuck's sake. And instead of being, I remember very distinctly, instead of being afraid, this cold curtain kind of coming down over me and going, look, man, you know, do you really think this is a way that you're going to get me to like you? You know, if anything, this is kind of making me feel that you're kind of an asshole, you know? So I'm like, either you got all these witnesses here, and this is not the way to get a woman. So I'm like, you gotta let me go, man. And like all these other people are like, oh, you gotta let her go, man, you gotta let her go. And my boyfriend is totally useless over there. He's tripping balls, you know. I'm like, my hero, you know. So I talk this guy out of it. I talk him down, I talk him out of it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm like, you know, I talk him down, and finally he lets me go. And I'm like, you gotta chill. And then finally everyone makes him leave at that point. But I distinctly remember that, and I remember not being afraid. I remember just being really annoyed and just like, you know, what the fuck? And then being annoyed with my boyfriend for being completely useless. So that was one time. And that's, you know, just a lack of fear response, which clearly is kind of unusual. And I didn't think of it at the time. Just I remember guys being like, you're a badass, you know, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? If I got afraid, like he wanted me to be afraid, I'm sure. He wanted me to be terrified, and just logically, I just had a logical response to it. So that was one time. And that was in high school. Another time in high school was I got involved with this guy who, at the time I didn't know that he was abusive. Like, you never know in the beginning, do you? But I forget what set him off, but he just liked abusing women or girls. I was young at the time. I think I was probably the same age, around 16. I've had kind of an interesting, eventful life starting in my teen years. So I'm 16, and suddenly something sets him off, and we're at my apartment. My mom isn't home at the time, and he shoves me to the ground and starts choking me. It's just after he punches me and then shoves me to the ground, and he's got his hands around my neck. And I remember, once again, I am just pissed off, and I know I have to fight for my life. I'm gonna put I can't put my computer down. I've got everything written down. Never mind. So I remember my mother's sewing kit and sewing machine was on this table that was kind of a low table, but it was within reach. And I remember, all I remember thinking is, there are scissors over there, and he's like, I'm starting to like see spots in front of my eyes, and he's choking me, and he's on top of me, right? And he's just yelling bullshit at me, and he's like, you know, obviously enjoying himself. And so I just reached over, you know, it's like a bad movie, honestly. It was ridiculous. And I'm thinking, I gotta get those scissors. So I get the scissors, I grab them, and I hold them to his throat. And I'm like, get the fuck off of me, man. And so, of course, that scares him, because all abusive men are at heart cowards, right? I mean, that's why they're abusing women who are like half their size. I'm a small girl, you know. I think I mentioned in another video, I'm like 5'5", and, you know, I've always been like around between 115, 119 pounds, you know, whatever. You look fatter on the camera, but I think I'm like 120 right now because of meds. They make you fat. But I hold him to his throat, and then he gets off me, of course, and I'm like, get the fuck out of my apartment, and wielded them at him, and he's like, you're not gonna do anything, and I'm like, you better believe I am. So he leaves. That was another incident. Not afraid, pissed, and like, you know, knowing that if I don't do something, I'm gonna be choked out, you know. So that was that particular situation. Let's see. All right, and then I moved to California to meet my dad, which is the time that he molested me. That was the first time I ever met him. Big idiot. So of course I was supposed to be staying with family and staying with him because it was like this big, like, oh, I'm gonna meet my dad, it's gonna be great. No, not so much. So I ended up staying with an aunt who was a drug dealer, and that's how I got involved with that whole thing. And she, also produced drugs. So where was I? Yeah, so I started dating this guy, and who's also in the drug trade, and he, was kind of not a good guy. Seriously involved with gangs and all that kind of thing. So I also started doing drugs myself, but then after a while I'm like, this is dumb, and it's like I'm way too involved in this whole scene, and and I wanted to just get out of it because I don't like the fact of being controlled by anything, and like drugs control your life, right? And I'm like, I don't need this, right? I don't want to be controlled by any drug. So I decided to quit, and I go cold turkey. And I'm like, I don't want to be involved with this guy anymore, like, because he had me like going along ride-alongs and holding the drugs and holding a gun, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life, And so I decided to leave him. And one day he comes to our apartment, and I open the door, and he holds a gun to me, and he's like, you're coming with me, all dramatic, And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, either you just shoot me right now at the apartment door, or you get the fuck out of my face. My logic being that if I go with him, something much worse is going to happen to me. Like, if I go with him, he's probably going to, rape me, and God knows what else, and then he's going to kill me. Or he could just shoot me there in front of all these, it's an apartment complex, there's people everywhere. I'm like, you're not going to shoot me here. Come on. Like, it didn't make any sense. So of course he gets this shocked look on his face, like, you're not afraid of me? And I'm like, get out of here. Either shoot me now or get out of here. I'm not coming with you. He's like, yes, you are. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like a really bad movie. And again, I wasn't afraid. I just had that kind of cold feeling come over me, and just no. And so he left, obviously. And he's like, I'll be back. I'm like, fine, you come on back, and same thing's gonna happen. And that was that. Okay, so that was that situation. I mean, there's a lot of these situations that happen. There's another one. Another time a guy held a knife on me. Fortunately, the security guard came in, and they were armed in California. This is the projects, and the security guys were able to be armed, and so he came in at the last minute, like my knight in shining armor, and stopped the guy from stabbing me, which was good. I've driven recklessly many times, almost got into accidents, and just wasn't afraid, just like, oh, okay. Just there's been a lot of situations, put it that way. I could read more, but I think you guys get the point. So I don't have a normal fear response. Now I've got my own theory about that. So there's a notification. It's going to drive me crazy if I don't get rid of it. So I don't have a normal fear response, and my camera is about to, hold on. I shouldn't have touched anything, and yet I did. Okay, I don't have a normal fear response, and I think my theory for that is, because I was abused so much as a kid, I think it just kind of got like literally, just beat out of me or whatever, or frightened out of me when I was little. But I don't remember ever being, well, no, I do remember being afraid, like as a really, really young kid, and then I remember not being afraid and just being sort of blank, and then really angry. I remember being full of rage at one point, and that kind of replaced the fear, was the rage, because I have access to anger, certainly. I mean, that's the one thing I have a lot of access to is anger. But I remember just not being afraid anymore at one point, and I think my theory is that that's why, I just didn't feel rage anymore, or I'm sorry, I didn't feel fear anymore because it got replaced by rage, and it was just kind of like, it got burnt out like a fuse. I just stopped feeling fear. And now I wonder if, because they do like tests like on your skin response and your heart response and like dilated eyes and your startle response and all that kind of thing. And I wonder if like things get changed like neurologically and physiologically over time through abuse. That would be interesting to find out. So I got to do, some more research on that, because like what I'm reading is like there are physiological, responses in the body, but are they born or are they learned? Now, my grandmother was a lot like me in terms of just like her personality, her demeanor, and all that sort of thing. And my mother used to get really pissed off because she's like, "You're just like your grandmother," like my NPD mother. And I would suspect if my grandmother had a personality disorder, it would be ASPD for sure. But because of stories she used to tell me. Now, my grandmother was also severely abused as a child. She had stories that she would tell me of her abusive father and then stepfather. Her mother had like several, husbands after her, after my grandmother's father died in a coal mine. They were coal miners when they came to America from Lithuania. They came here, we were coal miners. And the stepfather was extremely abusive, like would beat them all the time, and the mother would beat them too. There's a lot of alcoholism. And she told me about this plot she had to put ground glass in his drink. And I forgot what she said stopped her. I think it was just she was convinced that she would get caught because she would be the logical choice, of who would have done that, because she took the brunt of the abuse of the family. There's always that one who takes the brunt of the abuse, and that was her. And also, but she told me, she was like, it was just a beating, right? And she's like, my sister was always whining and complaining and scared and crying, and she's like, I just got sick of hearing it all the time, and so I took her beatings, and because it's just a beating, and that was the way she thought. And I was like, well, that is really interesting that she wasn't afraid, and so what made her that way, right? And does that get passed down? Although, I wonder if there was a point when she was really young that she was afraid, and then it just got, like with me, like just burnt out. So, and did that get passed down to me? That's a very interesting question, and I don't have the answer, but I suspect that could be part of it too. Like it could be 6 of one, half dozen the other. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's interesting stuff. It really is. And so, my fear response for things like that is just, it's just not there. It's interesting. Although I do have, because of the sexual abuse, I did have for a while when people would try to touch me, like I don't like being touched, and I would have like that kind of response because it's, the sexual abuse thing. I would have like a startle response to being touched, which is just like that makes sense. Because my response would be like, what I used to do was like people would like touch me, and I would, especially if a guy would touch me, I would immediately like want to hit them, that would be my response, which is not socially acceptable. So I had to hold that back. And I think I mentioned before that when this guy was sexually harassing me in grade school, I beat him really severely, which is something that's not socially acceptable. And I've always been very aware of what is socially acceptable and what is not. And I've been very cognizant of that and very mindful and careful to act in a socially acceptable way, especially when I became an adult. This was obviously not as a child and a teenager, but as I grew older, I was like, I need to put a lid on this behavior because I don't want to have a career. I don't want to be a career criminal. I don't want to be an addict or a career criminal. I want to function in society. That became something that was really important to me, especially after meeting my father's side of the family, because they were career criminals. Like all my uncles spent time in jail. My father spent time in jail. I had uncles that were like in prison, like long stretches kind of thing, And I'm like, I don't want to follow in those footsteps. I want to do the opposite, And I had, I was an intelligent person, still am. I wanted to get an education, because I knew that I could be more than that. I certainly had the potential. So that's that story. And it's just, I find it really to be interesting because it's not like it's it's not like, oh, I'm so awesome because I don't have a fear response. It's not that. It's just that it's what happened, I believe, as a result of abuse and possibly a bit of inheritable stuff from my grandmother. But like, I wonder if she got that way because of the abuse. And I just don't know. It's interesting because the mental illness is passed down. there was certainly, you know, personality disorders passed down, but it's also because of the abuse that was passed down. So there you have it. But yeah, there's, I mean, in ASPD and psychopathy and sociopathy, there is, you know, it's well documented, the lack of fear response. And so, you know, I was reading about that and I was like, oh, that fits me, you know, it fits me very well. Because I took so many risks and did so many reckless things, and I just remember not feeling that. I just remember when I should have been feeling fear, this curtain coming down. I just always think of it as a cold curtain, just coming down over me when it should have been a response of fear. So yeah, that is interesting. Although I've always been careful to avoid like bodily harm, in terms of like, I don't like getting into fights. Like I'm not gonna get into like a fist fight, you know? I mean, I'm not gonna intentionally put myself in harm's way to get beaten up or something like that. Like, I have no interest in that. Like, I don't want to get my face beat up, you know? Like, stay away from the face, you know what I mean? That's like the narcissistic side, and that's literally what I was thinking. Like, I don't want my face to get ruined. Talk about like the narcissistic side of ASPD in women. There you go. There you have it. Yeah. So, and that really was the reason, you know. And also, I want to avoid pain. Certainly, I don't want to be in physical pain. Like, I'm in physical pain enough as it is with my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Like, I am in pain constantly, and it's just like it's exhausting. So, you know. So anyway, that is my little piece on fear and ASPD, and even in women, we have it too. In case people think that it's any different, it really isn't. It's because all the testing is like on criminal men, and I'm like, it's so tiresome. The testing pool is always from men who are like in prison, you know, and that's not all there is out there. There are just normal people walking around, normal people with ASPD. Well, we're not normal, but you know, functioning citizens walking around who have the same thing going on, and it would be good if they would test from us as well, and especially women. So that'd be nice. And I know that there's a couple of psychologists who are watching, and hi guys, thank you for watching my channel. I appreciate it. And so maybe this would be helpful for you guys too, just to know that it's not just the criminal element that has these symptoms and these personality traits. It's, you know, it's us as well, and it is women as well. So and as I said, I'm not really sure if it's heritable or if it's learned, but I suspect maybe it's a little bit of both, you know, and it'd be interesting to know, and more research certainly needs to be done. But it definitely started in like mid-childhood, and really started to happen in like my teenage years, because, you know, teenagers think that they're immortal anyway, but it was like that squared, you know. But yeah, so anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'm going to end this video now and do some editing, and I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you more later. Bye.